store is now located. But much of the information you're going to hear that ties all the factual information together is actually fiction. Fiction intended to make the story of the three sisters understood and appreciated. And now, the story of the three sisters.
My name is Adele Cook. I was born in Pompey on a farm in that big valley right there at the corner of Pompey and Lafayette and Manlius. Well, kind of like right there. The neighbors are always arguing about exactly where they did live. Some thought they lived in Manlius, some in Pompey, and some in Lafayette. Anyways, my mommy and daddy were farmers, of course, except for the preacher at the church. I think everybody was a farmer back then. Anyhow, all our neighbors were farmers. Now, there was 8 kids in our family, 4 of each kind. I was the first sister born in our family, so I had to help with chores about as soon as I could walk. Fact is, I could milk a cow before I could walk. At least that's what my daddy told everybody with a big smile on his face. Always bragging about me. Then he'd tell people I was changing diapers on my brothers and sisters while I was still wearing diapers. Life was good in those early days. Lots of food there on the farm. Lots of things to do. Daddy, now he played the fiddle. Oh my, could my daddy play that fiddle. Turkey in the straw, turkey in the hay, strike up the tune called Turkey in the Straw. And I did go to school. Nice new one-room schoolhouse just a little bit down the road from our house. I even learned to read and write. Now, Mom and Dad were smart cookies all right, but neither one could read or write. They depended on me for that kind of thing. But I learned all the important stuff there on the farm. I learned how to fire up the wood stove in the kitchen, go out to the chicken coop and collect the eggs, take the eggs into the kitchen and fry them up, fry the pork scrapple, toast the bread over the wood stove, and have it ready for Daddy when he came in the house from early feedings. And how to use a washboard and homemade soap to get clothes clean, how to sew patches on Daddy's bib overalls, how to sew up holes in socks, how to feed corn and hay to the cows and the horses, and how to scoot out to the outhouse and back with the February temperatures below freezing. Boy, could it ever get cold in Pompey. And then Mom had another baby girl. Her name was Mariette. And then another one. Her name was Emmeline. And another one named Lottie. And I gotta tell you something right here and now. If you're a girl child and you got 3 younger sisters and the year is in the 1850s, you are the mama number 2. I remember asking Daddy where all the babies came from. And he said he didn't know, they just showed up. And then I turned 13 years old. And for the next few years, everything started to change. I had feelings I never had before. Now lots of them feelings had to do with this neighbor boy named Charlie.
Now, Adele Cook, she lived on the farm right there to the south of us, and everybody had good things to say about Cook family, but I never thought about them much one way or the other. Fact is, I never paid the family any attention at all till one day at church. And then the Cook girl, the oldest one, named Adele, comes strolling in there down that center aisle with a smile that would knock you right under your butt. And a way of walking, too. Holy smoking gee willikers, that there, Adele Cook parading down that center aisle at that there church was the most gorgeous thing I ever did see. I mean, on that Sunday morning. Well, they had me singing up there in front of the church with the choir, which I hated to do, but, well, my mouth just kind of fell open watching her walk down that aisle, and she was smiling Me. Next thing I know, the guy singing next to me in the choir punches me in the arm and he says, "Close your mouth, the song's been over for quite a while." Now, I've seen a lot of women in my time, I must admit, but I mean for a guy my age, I've seen a lot of women, but I'd never ever seen anything like that there, Adele Cook walking down there. No, sorry, Bob. I made up my mind right then and there that I was going to see a lot more about Adele Cook.
Well, being a grown-up girl is a tough thing to do. Seems like your body is telling you to do one thing, and you know you're not supposed to do that thing. And then adding to the problem is that Charlie Eager. He's coming past every evening now, knocking on the door, and then sitting on the porch talking with me. Oh, he's a good talker, all right. Says all the right things. Smiles a lot. Got good teeth, too. Washes up good, too. Never did smell like cow manure, even though he spends most of the day shoveling it around the Eager farm down there. Of course, when we're going to school, I see him there, too. Now, Charlie don't take many prizes for smartest boy in the class, but he sure knows how to say the right things at the right time and how to smile and please people, especially please female people, like the teacher. I don't think Miss What's-Her-Name ever asked him a question in the whole 7 years we went to school together. And now I understand why. He wouldn't have had the slightest idea what the right answer would have been. He just sits there and smiles. And then at the end of the school day, he walks me back home. That is, in the 7th or 8th grade, he started walking me home. Before that, he didn't even know who I was.
Well, one of the toughest things a boy has to do is get through the years when it's time for things to start happening, and they ain't started to happen. And girls too, I suppose. Now, I'm going to tell you some things here that all you young men in this here audience should ought to know. That includes you, Charlie. The preacher here, the preacher ain't here, is he? Now, if you want to get to know a girl real good, you know what I mean. There's no place to take her to be alone and comfortable and nobody's looking. Now, sure, there are lots of cornfields around, but that just ain't right, the cornfield. You can hide out good between the rows of corn stalks, but laying down there on that dirt ain't all that good. And then you've got the church basement, of course. But you can really get in trouble down there. So if you can work it out just right, the best place and only place are your hay mounds. Right. You take that girl into one of the hay mounds of a nice summer evening, and you got the ideal place to be. You got a nice clean smell, you got a nice soft place to lay down, and, well, you do what you can do. But I got to figure out now how to get Adele Cook up in that hay mound. And then I got to get her to do some kissing and hugging and whatever.
When I turned 17, I sat down by myself out by the creek behind the barn and tried to figure things out a little bit. Mama had mentioned several times that she was 17 when she got married to Daddy. And quite honestly, I was tired of working every minute of every day and raising 3 sisters and 4 brothers. And those 3 sisters, they said I had turned into a snooty tootie, said I was a hussy, even said I was a kind of a witchy-woo, so maybe it was time for me to leave the farm. But the question was, how do you go about doing that? Seemed to me the only answer was that Charlie Eager. He was certainly handsome enough, and he kept paying me more attention every day. And yes, we did do some serious kissing. So maybe it was time to go ahead and take the next step. Now, he said, he wanted to see how our hay mow down in the barn. Said he heard it was one of the finest hay mows in the whole valley. Asked me would I take him down there and show it to him. I know exactly what he wants in that hay mow. I didn't watch all those cows and sheep mating, pigs mating, and horses and dogs mating all those years and not understand things like that.
Well, I really wasn't quite ready for what happened next. I got to admit that. I told Adele I'd kind of like to see their hay mow, and before I even mentioned all the reasons I had made up for seeing that hay mow, she says, okay, let's go take a look. So we did. She climbed up the ladder to the mow before I did. Now, I tried not to look up, but I damn near fell off the ladder. I mean, Adele was wearing a dress. And then, when I got up the ladder, she's laying there on the hay looking up at me with a smile on her face, an inviting smile. And we did it. Yes, sir, Bob, holy smoke. No arguments, nothing. In fact, she kind of led the way. Oh my goodness, it was the finest, absolutely most wonderful moment in all of my life. So we rested up a bit, and I smiled at her, and I said, well, Adele, let's do it again now, honey. And she said, no. I said, what? I said, hey, we got to do what we can. And she said, no. Well, to make a long story short, she said, next time we do it, she's going to be Mrs. Charlie Eager. And I said, okay, let's go see the preacher right now.
And we got married in 1861. And a year later, I had a little boy. And Charlie and I had a nice little house on his father's farm. Maybe life wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was some better than raising sisters and brothers was. Of course, I still did the eggs and the scrapple and the clothes washing and did chores and got so tired at the end of the day, I could hardly stand up. But even then, there was fun times, like those barn dances, and Daddy's fiddling was some kind of fun, and of course, Charlie was everybody's favorite dancer, well, especially the women. They liked Charlie. And then I got pregnant again. Being pregnant didn't seem to go too well this time. Things didn't seem to be right down there where the baby was. But I figured once the baby arrived, everything would go back to normal. I mean, I was still a young woman, only 28 years old, but that's not what happened. The baby arrived, a little boy, and he was all right. But then the midwife said, honey, you gotta stop the bleeding. She said the blood was just pouring out of me. She put the baby up by my chest, and I kissed the top of his little head. And I died.
After Adele died, life was real bad, real bad. My mama took our two little boys over to her house while I tried to get the spring planting in the ground, and I worked sun up to dark time. And then we'd go over to the house to see the kids, but they were usually sound asleep by then. This went on for almost a year. And I could tell the strain was showing up on my mama. She was the right age for a grandma, not for a full-time mama. Then one day, it was in the springtime, this woman walked into the barn while I was milking the milch cow, and I looked up, and there was sister-in-law Mariette. Mariette Cook, Adele's younger sister. Most people call her Etta. She was about 30 years old, maybe. Nice enough woman. Not the knockout, hit you in the face beauty, but her sister was when she walked down that middle aisle of that church. The fact is, up till then, I never did see Etta in a dress. She wore bib overalls, just like all us farm men did. Only woman in Pompey wore bib overalls like that. Everybody thought she was strange, but she worked hard, did the work men did, seemed to like it. And she was smart. And she tended to have a good smile, yes sir, a good smile. Instead of wearing her hair long and braided like most women did, she kept it cut kind of short. It even reached down to her shoulders. Well, I'm sitting there in that stool milking. Etta pulls up another stool and sets it down right there next to me. I look up, I keep milking away, I look up, she smiles at me. She says, "You need a woman, Charlie, and you need a mother for those two boys."
Now, I've had my eye on Charlie ever since my sister was had died having the baby. I figured there would be a time when he'd be ready to replace Adele, his wife, my sister. And when that time came, I would make myself available. Actually, I had my eye on Charlie even before he married my sister. Charlie was the most handsome man in Pompey, not the smartest, but the most handsome. And pretty hard worker. He got his crops in and took care of them, and he cut his corn, and he shopped it the right way. He cut his hay, and he brought it in for the threshing. Not many men ever affected me the way Charlie did. I stayed away from him while he was married to my sister. That's not the case anymore. He's alone now, and it's just a matter of time until he gets picked off. So I decided it's time to make my move.
Well, I finished the milking, turned to face Etta straight on. "Etta," I said, "you sure you know what you're talking about here?" She nodded her head. I said to her, "You know that raising two boys ain't always the easiest thing in the world to do." She nodded her head. I said, "Making meals for us 3 times a day can be a big job." She nodded her head. "And doing laundry for all of us is sometimes tough. You know that." She nodded her head. I said, "People might think it's wrong that you married your dead sister's husband. You know that too, don't you?" She nodded her head. I said, "Being married to a man involves more important activity than just cooking and washing and raising kids. You know that?" She nodded her head. I said, "I think maybe we should try some of that important activity before you marry me and come to live here. Don't you?" She nodded her head. Then I said, "And maybe right now is the time for trying that important activity." She nodded her head. Then I said, "And where would you like to try that important activity?" And she smiled and said, "Right here up in the haymow, okay?" I nodded my head.
After trying some of the most activity in the haymow, Charlie said he would like to have me for his wife. And for the first time since I was baptized at the church, I wore a dress for the wedding. One time, one day, for about 2 hours. Same church, same preacher, ugly old man, thought he was the most important person in Pompey, so superior to all of us. Maybe he was superior, but I could care less. Only a handful of people at the wedding. We tried to keep it a secret, but you can't do that in a small farm town. After that, our lives settled into the usual farm routine. Some high points, some low points. The 2 nephews turned out to be really good boys. Oh, like all boys growing up, there were a few problems, but only a few. And I wore those bib overalls every day, and to tell you the truth, the older they got, the more washing they had, the tighter they fit. I'll take a cup of tea out to Charlie in the barn, and he'd come into the outside and watch me walk back to the house. He thought I didn't know why he was watching. One of the strangest things about men is that they think a woman doesn't know when their backside is being looked at and admired. But to tell you the truth, that's one of the ugly things a man notices about. That's the only thing a man notices about a woman, and that's all right. We had good years together.
That is one good woman. not only a hard worker, but a smart one. It was her idea that we stop just being what they call a subsistence farmer, that we start raising cows to make milk for taking into Syracuse. See, you've got a city right next door that grows bigger every day. You've got to take advantage. So what we did, we started being what we call a dairy farm. We worked our way up to milking 16 cows twice a day. Of course, we had both older boys helping us, so there were 4 of us doing the milking. And we made a lot of money. Now this big milk plant down in Syracuse kept wanting us to make even more milk, and the whole idea was Edda's to start with. And then she's thinking maybe we buy the cook farm next door and hire some extra help and maybe milk 30 cows. Now the cook farm was her family farm. But her mom and dad was getting old and they wanted to stop working the farm, so we bought it. But this woman is smart and a hard worker, and boy, in those big overalls. Well, at the end of a hard day's work in the house being full of kids, ain't nothing better than a half hour with that up in that hay.
It all happened so fast. One day I was a happy, satisfied woman with a good family and a good husband and a growing business. And the next day when it came summer, I'd usually jump right out of bed. I'd be the first one on the go. I just couldn't get out of bed. I just couldn't make my arms or my legs move. I just lay there, looking up at the ceiling. And the last words I heard Charlie say, "Hey, time to get up, Dad. Time to get up." And I didn't get up. Ever again. I got it.
It took a long time for me to get over Edda's passing. I remember the preacher at the funeral, him holding up his arms with his eyes closed and saying, "This is God's will." And I wanted to say, what the hell are you talking about, God's will? If this God you keep telling me about makes things happen the way it is to your kids. And Sister Ella, why are they gone? And if he took them, why didn't he take me? Is he better than me? Maybe I'm better than him. I don't understand. Well, the preacher came down the aisle just before the funeral. He was all upset. He said, "You've got a woman in my church for a funeral, laying there in that casket, wearing those clothes." Up at the front of the church, in front of all those people. The preacher, he was so upset. He said, "There'd be no funeral with the deceased dressed like that." I told him that's fine with me. I just assumed he stormed the hell out of the church and I would bury him. Didn't need it. But then he finally agreed to do the service, and Edda was buried wearing her best set of building overalls. We didn't grow the farm any bigger. With Edda gone, there didn't seem to be a reason to do that, but the kids all kept growing and working, and we got along okay. The fact is, when it came to money, we got along pretty good. Syracuse kept getting bigger, and the demand for milk and butter and cheese kept growing. We got hired hands and leveled off of milking about 40 or so cows. And I got to tell you, I was so different after Edda's passing. I spent more time sitting on the porch just looking down the valley. Much time thinking. I stopped going to church. Edda was right. The preacher ain't nothing but a loudmouth know-it-all. Does a lot of hooting and hollering and finger pointing and tells us how guilty we are. We don't got enough to think about every day, just getting the work done. Here at the farm, we still do get the work done, but that hired help is good. And there were some times when I would think, well, the kids will soon be old enough to run things without me. Maybe I don't have to stick around much longer. Maybe it would be best if I just joined the Dale and Edda down there in the church cemetery. Maybe it's time for that to happen. But then I snap out of it, just stop thinking like that, and go in the house, try to get some sleep in.
Now, I'm the only one of the four sisters that got sent into Syracuse to the finishing school. The only one. Mother and father must have realized that there was something special or different about me. Something that set me apart from sisters Adele and Etta right from the beginning. Well, of course, when we met, and I must admit, I charmed my husband right from the beginning. Well, that was what was expected of me. I mean, he was respected, well-known businessman at a very big company in Syracuse. And together, we were right up there at the top of the social ladder. I mean, my husband was an officer. I mean, a highly placed officer at the Remington Typewriter Company, located right there on the Erie Canal. Well, one of the best businesses in Syracuse. And oh yes, we belonged to the Century Club, the most prestigious club in the city. And life was so busy back then that I didn't get out to Pompey much at all. Well, there was the Bridge Club and the Luncheon Club and the Ladies' Aid Society and, of course, the hair appointments. And besides that, I just couldn't stand the smell of those farms out in Pompey. Ugh, terrible. No place for a lady. But then my husband, a very accomplished individual, I must say, well, he just up and died. And it turned out that our big house there on James Street, well, actually, it was right there on the corner of Oak and James, a mansion, really. Well, it turned out that my husband didn't own it at all. It was owned by the typewriter company, and the company told me that I had a month to get out of it. Well, and then it seemed like all my closest friends in the important clubs were never home when I called. And to top it all off, I went down to the bank to make sure that there was enough money for me to live on, and, well, there was no money. I guess we had spent it as fast as we earned it. I had nothing. Nothing except a fine wardrobe, which included 14 pair of shoes. Well, Mother and Father were gone by this time. The family farm, the Cook farm, was now part of Charlie Eager's dairy farm. And the Eager farm was well known as being one of the most successful operations in Pompey. And it seemed to me that with my sisters gone, I should be the owner of at least half of the Eager dairy farm.
Lottie came out to see me one day in the spring of the early 1920s. I don't even know how she got there. She'd never been out of Pompey since leaving for finishing school, as far as I knew. She was a pain in the butt as a kid. The youngest daughter, of course, so very well spoiled. Both Etta and Adele called her the family brat. Lottie told her mother one time she would not come to a Cook family reunion because she would never be seen with Etta. Etta was wearing her bib overall. So anyhow, me and my aunts were having some dinner about noon or so when she showed up. I asked her to come in and sit down with us and get something to eat, but she looked at the food and got kind of white in the face and said, "Let's talk on the front porch." So we go out to the front porch, and she was about to sit down on the swing out there. And then she run her finger over the seat of the swing, and told me to get a damp towel and clean it first. So I did. So she sat down, so we talked. Actually, I listened. She talked. She asked about the old Cook farm, and I told her it was now part of our estate, which had been for years. She asked how I got it. I told her that Etta had set up us buying it from Mom and Dad when they got too old to work for them. "Oh," she said, So Anna owned it then. I said, yeah, we put it in Anna's name and my name, since it was our family farm. But it was never two separate farms, it was all part of this one farm called the Eager Farm. And our kids, mine, both Adele's and mine, and Ed's, they would wind up owning it when I went.
Well, it soon became very obvious to me that the Cook family farm was, by rights, mine. And I intended to get it. It was worth a lot of money, and I could easily move back to James Street when I sold it. Well, I immediately contacted the most prestigious law firm on South Salina Street and told them I wanted ownership of the Cook farm and why I was entitled to it as the only surviving heir. Well, the lawyers talked to me for a long time, and what they wound up recommending was that I marry Charles, and then my claim to all property would be valid whenever I wanted to claim it. Well, this made good sense to me, and I could see my moving back to James Street. Of course, I was certainly deserving and entitled. So I went to Charles and explained to him that I was simply totally devastated by being alone in this world and desperately needed acceptable male companionship. I explained that the Cook family, that's my family, and the Eager family, that's his family, had been very close for generations, and both he and I owed each other something special, like companionship, like having someone to talk to, someone to depend on for friendship. And I explained that there certainly would be no surprises of any kind, since he was so intimately familiar with my two sisters.
Well, I gotta tell you right off the bat, Lottie could have knocked me over with a feather duster when she told me she wanted to get married to me. I mean, here was a tooty, snooty, bitchy, witchy in the Cook family telling me she wanted to marry me. A poppy farmer milking 40 cows twice a day, me. A crusty old man with a sex appeal of a dead fish, me. Wearing clothes that just about always smelled like cows, like cow manure. Ah. Oh yeah, and I gotta tell you something else. If there was ever a woman that would be last on the hey my list, Lottie. But she kept after me. And she kept playing the Cook Eager family card on me. Said I owed much of my good life to the Cook family relationship. She would fit in perfectly for the remaining years. Said I had a responsibility to keep that strong relationship alive. So after a while, I started to weaken a little bit. After all, how many men could say they married 3 sisters? How many men would want to say they married 3 sisters? I asked the kids about it, and they said my getting married again was okay, but they didn't think maybe it should be Aunt Lottie. Finally, Lottie said to me she really needed to marry me, and I said, okay, but not in the church with that preacher. And she said the local justice of the peace was fine, and I married her. The 3rd sister, I married 3 sisters, but this one, we slept in separate bedrooms.
Well, I waited a few months after the wedding to tell Charles that my lawyers would be in touch with him, that I wanted ownership of the Cook farm to come back to me immediately. And I pointed out forcefully that if he created any problems, I would also sue to get his family farm, the Eager farm, and my lawyers said I would win.
I told her, look now, there's no way you're gonna get the Cook Farm property or the Eager Farm property. They all one farm. And Adele's kids and Edda's kids and my kids are gonna get that farm when I'm gone.
Well, I told him, well, that's exactly the position my lawyers have hoped you would take. So I put on my shawl, gathered up my purse, and got ready to leave. The papers will be served on you tomorrow, and there's already a date assigned for court proceedings. And I stormed out the front door of the house.
Stop right there, just stop right there. You can't do this to the kids and your sisters. You stop. I got this here shotgun in my hands, and I am going to protect this property. You stop or I'll shoot.
Whoa.
Well, I did something awful. I guess maybe it's time now for me to join up with my Della and my Anna. We had so many good times together. We did. And now I think we're going to be together again. And maybe even have more good times.
And so ends the story of the three sisters. And if you wish to see them in the back room, we have all kinds of pictures and newspaper articles from this factual story. It got a lot of attention back then, 1933, whatever. But regardless, the sadness of the shootings, there are many residents of Central New York today that can trace their bloodlines back to the Charlie Eager marriages, to the three Cook sisters. And if you have questions, we'll try to answer them, and Ruth will be the leading answer. So thank you very much.